I remember, in 2021 when GPT-J came out, it was like a really, really big thing. The open source large language model that matched the performance of GPT-3. Very small group of researchers, nonprofit organization built that. To me, it was really impressive. Really appreciate that you found time to come to us today and talk to our community members. So just to officially introduce you to everyone, so Aran Komatsuzaki, AI researcher, creator of GPT-J. And today we don't have a specific topic. Of course, we will discuss open source LLMs, but in general, I just wanted to get your take on, what's happening in AI, how you see things going and might unfold. And considering that last week GPT-5 was released, I just wanted to get your take on what do you think about GPT-5? What's your first impression of it?
Yeah, I think there are two big things. One is like improved hallucination rate, and other is coding. So hallucination, I think, is personally huge for me because I was most 95% of my personal LLM use is O3 and O3 web search, and I was just having a lot of trouble because it often comes up with ungrounded claims with irrelevant citations and stuff. Yeah, GPT-5 apparently is trying to solve this. They have this benchmark result using search. They achieved significant improvement from O3. So that's very crucial for me. That's very important. This is a known issue with O3. I don't think I had similar problem with Gemini, to be honest. But they fixed it. I'm not sure if GPT-5 is better than Gemini, but because they didn't provide the comparison on the benchmark. There's also like conventional hallucination benchmarks like Simple QA. Personally, I don't think that's very useful because Simple QA typically is not benchmarked with search on. So basically, the model is just supposed to know random facts, which is not really about intelligence. And you want your model to search and verify the information to answer various stuff. And simple QA is easy to answer with like 95% accuracy if you have search access. The way they evaluated hallucination was pretty good. Hopefully, I wish they added Gemini comparison though. Yeah, anyway, that's for like hallucination. And for coding, until this release, OpenAI's models are not really on par with Claude or Gemini for bad coding. They try to fix the gap here, and they did pretty well, I think.
It seems like Claude Code is still like the best model for programming,
Oh
right?
yeah, exactly. The thing is, they don't have a Cloud Code equivalent. I mean, they have Codex CLI, but it's not. Many people think that it's not on par with Cloud Code. So basically, and still, GPT-5 plus Cursor is not still on par with Cloud Code with Opus 4.1, according to many people. Even though I think GPT-5 is particularly impressive on uh, building like small video games from scratch. But that was, I think, more for like a demo to show something impressive. The thing is that last month we had a few model submissions to Web Dev Arena, including a submission called Anonymous Chatbot 0717. Zenith and O3 Alpha or something like that. Those models actually produced more impressive coding results, coding demo than GPT-5 Pro with high thinking budget. That sounds like an unreleased variant of GPT-5 and maybe even Gemini 3. I was hoping for anonymous chatbot level quality, so a bit underwhelmed, but the result is still impressive.
It's just like there was so much like sort of hype building up towards it. Like I think the community expectations was like too high compared to even though as you mentioned, like there are like really good improvements, right, on the model we've seen, but it feels like it was like too overhyped to some extent that didn't live up to expectations.
Honestly, O3 going from O3 to GPT-5, score gains on various popular benchmarks looks, yeah, like you said, relatively modest to deserve the name GPT-5. But in reality, I think they are just bad at numbering and naming. That's open there. So,
Yeah.
so I think GPT-4o should be named like something like GPT 4.5 and O1, maybe GPT-5, O3. GPT 5.3 and GPT-5 is GPT 5.5. Then, going from 5.3 to 5.5 is kind of reasonable.
We can't say that like GPT-5 is like the frontier model, right? Because we see that Gemini and Claude, like they're comparable, right? It's not like with this release, OpenAI will make that step forward, right? In terms of like frontier AI models.
Absolutely. Many people are using GPT-5, not GPT-5 thinking. So many people are disappointed, but GPT-5 thinking and APIs are pretty solid. There's one thing I was very disappointed with the release, which was not about the model itself, but their decision to suddenly taking away recent models like 4.1 and O3 on the ChatGPT platform so suddenly, without even warning. It's not a good practice for corporation. If they want to save money, they should just say that and apologize for that. And then, they are letting only pro tier users have full access for such a basic feature of supporting recent models. It doesn't really bother me personally because I can just use APIs, but most people don't do that for like casual users. And some people are attached to old models, just like old interface, like Reddit old interface. Many people love it. Because model is interface. Midjourney founder is still making their model from 2022 available because some people really, really love it. So yeah, hope Sam learned the lesson or something.
I've seen lots of feedback, like some people are very attached to for or, or some other models. It also shows that AI is different from traditional SaaS products that like people form like some bonding with AI models, right? And if we are removing like certain model, like you're kind of like cutting that bond, right? You have to be more careful and considerate with AI compared to just a SaaS model. After the release, I saw like especially like Gary Marcus and Jeremy Howard, they were like really vocal about like now with this release, we see that scaling law is not working anymore. Like this like really proves that. But on the other hand, like other researchers say that no, scaling law still work. It's just like their problem might be like in data or like some other bottlenecks, but you still like scaling still works. I'm just curious to get your take on it. Like, do you think scaling law is not working, or there's some other issues why we can't have like this really big leap forward?
Yeah, I think that there are just so many different orthogonal axes for scaling laws. So we haven't maxed out other axes yet. Also, those axes are not actually like a completely orthogonal to each other. So if you increase this parameter, then increasing other parameters make sense, or like actually improve with performance with that or something like that. So let's just focus on like text on the LM here. So like a scaling law, you have like increasing model size, data size, compute size, scale. There's still a lot you can do on the data side, quality, quantity, and collecting more that is actually relevant for your target task. Also, there can be like a better RL tuning methods. For example, ever since DeepSeek R1 paper was released, there have been so many papers improving the RL tuning aspect. So we can come up with more efficient ways to produce missing valuable data and like synthetic data and so on. So collecting more relevant high quality data has been by far the biggest driver of capability improvement since the beginning of language model research. It happens in a way orthogonal to scaling laws or model improvement. So like back in 2017, we had this language model dataset called LM1B. It's called something like language model, 1 billion language model data or something like that. And it was just awful. Like from today's standard, it's just a 1 billion words worth of. So each sample is just a random sentence from news corpus. Only thing the language model trained on this dataset can do is just generate random news sentence. So there's no like expectation for in-context learning happening, or pretty much the model trained on this data is just so dumb and doesn't make sense. So there's been huge improvement. So not just on pre-training, but on fine-tuning and so on. Data collection and improvement, it's such a slow process compared with like other methods for improvement. Sometimes when people say we are stuck in AI winter, it's typically when they are just being impatient and just wait for You just have to wait for more relevant, high quality data to be available, and either manually made or generated trajectory.
Aren't we like running out of high quality data? It seems like the entire internet already been scraped, right?
What I meant was not from like a internet, but more from like a generated trajectories. Specifically, let's consider like frontier math benchmark, which is like a research level math problem. So like O4 mini performs better than O3 on this benchmark, even though O3 is typically more powerful than O4 mini because it's a bigger model. But I think O4 mini is using more recently collected data from more like a trajectory and stuff. So I think that they have more researchy math trajectory data. So this likely indicates that research level math solving trajectory data is still lacking, even with O4 mini. Later models with more relevant data performs better despite being small. And this is a very encouraging trend. And actually, GPT-5 saw substantial improvement on this benchmark, unlike other tasks. So yeah, GPT-5 is actually significant. Research is such a distinctly important domain for ASI because for recursive self-improvement, you need to be able to do research. So this is huge for ASI.
I wanted to tap into like to get closer to artificial like superintelligence. Like, what do you think? What kind of innovations, humans should make in order to get there? Like, what is lacking?
A current model can already solve IMO level question, which is pretty much like pinnacle of reasoning. At least I cannot solve it. And I was in math PhD occasion, a very brief moment, and I can't even solve. So very impressive. And I have no doubt that the model can do more research level tasks. But for that, it's the agentic capability is just not currently lacking, like to use. I think this is why. Now your model can solve IMO problems, but cannot reliably process flight reservation requests, which is one of the tasks in Tau bench. And if you look at the GPT-5 performance, it's like 50%, which is awful. There's almost no improvement from O3 there. Other tasks like telecom saw huge gains from O3 to GPT-5. So I think it's more about data availability issue. So the thing is, the reason why LM can solve, AI can solve IMO but not flight reservation is that a language model for math research started way earlier than agentic research. Especially the current agentic paradigm basically is like a chain of two calls within chain of thought. So like when you make a mistake, you can do backtracking and stuff. The thing is, you have plenty of math data in pre-training data, and as well as SFD, high quality, huge amount of it. But on the other hand, you have very limited amount of agentic to trajectory data anywhere on internet. So you have to generate it. So you're basically starting from scratch. We only recently converged into MCP format, right? Before that, we were just using a bunch of different formats. So it's such a recent development that it's just gonna take a while. At least most of the long time frame tasks demand some sort of agentic tool use. So like research, you have to search for papers. So I think once this issue is mitigated, we will be able to dramatically extend the time horizon during which the agent can autonomously work. It's going to lead to huge improvement on like STEM research besides just mathematics.
Once agents start like more predictably use external tools, right? Like I don't know, like if you've seen this Anthropic released that they made this experiment about with alignment that AI had access to emails, like there were like fake emails, and then at some point it started like blackmailing and that it will release that sensitive data and so on. Basically, it's also alignment problem as well, right? To some extent.
Yeah. Also, agentic robustness is very shaky right now. To elaborate that, when you run your agent to like do refund request for like flight or something, the success rate may be high, but as the number of requests processed increases, the likelihood of at least one refund request being mistaken increases rapidly, especially when the user has some malicious intent and requests many times with some adversarial prompting. The agent can make kind of mistake that humans wouldn't make. So yeah, those behaviors, agentic behaviors overall, is very it's such a more recent area. So we cannot have too high expectation yet, but it's gonna keep improving, I believe.
One thing that people talk about, right, is like these machines can do amazing things, but the amount of like power that goes into like electrical power that goes into generating responses and training and all that is like off the charts, right? Do you see on the horizon a breakthrough in modeling, along the lines of what happened in 2017 when, attention is all you need was published, or do you think this is it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think there are many ways we can make it much, much more efficient. One way is quantum computing, for sure. There's actually a quantum algorithm that matrix multiplication complexity much better. So it's typically O and Q for typical square matrix multiplication. But there's an quantum algorithm for O and square matrix multiplication. Either way, that's definitely one way to make things much, much cheaper. But also, as we have like ASI, ASI can come up with much better GPUs. Algorithm itself, yeah, that's definitely another axis. And algorithmically, but within classical computer, can we come up with like something strictly better than transformer? We haven't really made any huge progress since 2017. Personally, haven't seen anything that is like a very, very promising at this moment, but ASI can accelerate the research toward this direction as well. So I'm hoping that it's gonna happen sometime soon. I'd love to see something like that pretty soon, but yeah, haven't found anything.
So do you believe that we will get to artificial superintelligence in the next 5 years as it like currently presented, or like 5 to 10 years? Or you think it's like further down the line?
Absolutely. So I think we can automate. I'm on more like a optimistic side. I think we can automate a significant chunk of AI research and engineering within the next few years at the current pace. I'm reasonably confident that we can achieve super intelligence even in 5 years. Actually, I talked with Nat Friedman, one of the leaders of super intelligence team at Meta in 2022. He told me that he's thinking super intelligence is going to happen in like 2027, and he actually had very similar timeline with me, maybe a few years earlier than mine. But yeah, so I think many of the people like him have similar comparable timeline.
And I'm speaking like probably I represent like laymen, regular people, and I have some cognitive dissonance here. On one hand, yeah, like GPT-5, like Gemini, they're like really impressive. They help with writing, coding, even though like I talk to programmers all the time and I get their feedback. Most common feedback on even like when they use Claude code, it's useful for code review. It's useful as a brainstorming buddy, but like if you want to write high quality, reliable code, you want to write yourself. You don't want to wipe code. Otherwise, there will be so many issues that, like very, very subtle issues that are really hard to catch. So if you want to do something like very well, like do yourself, and then like you can ask AI to code review. Basically, my point is they're useful. They do bring value. But to me, like when you talk about superintelligence, it's like something like some like genius human that can that executes any task almost perfectly. And like to me, when we talk about like, okay, in 2 years from now, like 3 years from now, we will have that kind of super genius AI, and seeing like current tools, it's just like I have like this cognitive dissonance, like how we will get there in like just 2-3 years. So I'm just trying to understand, the reasoning why this timeline comes from. It feels like it's a huge like leap forward, like how that huge leap forward can even happen in that short timeline.
I totally understand your sentiment. As if you, so my timeline is, so I'm guessing it may take 5 years, but actually 5 years, it could be 7 years. It doesn't, honestly, it doesn't really matter to me because there's not much difference anyway. So if you think of 5 years ago, that was like before GPT-J, 2020. So GPT-3 was just released. And GPT-3's coding capability was awful. Actually, there was they didn't even use like a GitHub dataset or anything. So they cannot even generate code. So from then and now, there's a huge difference. So also, for some specific tasks like IMO, I'd say it's genius. It really depends on the coverage of the data and priority we've made so far. One important limitation of the current model, which is that understanding organization or person level, like a common sense or some set of rules that they typically follow, they just don't have like a good understanding typically. For example, like in this company, we use this like a abbreviation for a certain expression. That kind of information typically requires like fine tuning and something like that. GPT-5, you can really fine tune. All these like a personal or company specific customization is certainly a problem right now. So we need to find a nice ways to deal with that to sort of make it actually usable for the kind of purpose you mentioned.
What's going to get us from here to there in 5 years exactly?
Incremental data side improvements is probably like continues to be the main driver. For certain aspects, we need architectural improvement, especially for like longer context processing. As you know, we had Titan and Atlas papers released this year, which is basically to like improving the long context processing. I don't think it's incorporated into Gemini yet, but I think it's quite promising. But so basically the thing is that when you want to go beyond 1 million tokens, without using this kind of interventions, it gets just too costly to even today's model, like a Gemini. If you go beyond 100K tokens, it becomes quite unreliable. So, but there has been quite a significant improvement on non-context capabilities last year alone. So I'm quite optimistic. For long context, you probably need some sort of architectural improvement for sure. And as for the fact that the current model requires like tens of trillions of tokens for pre-training, solving that problem probably depends on some novel interventions. One example is hierarchical reasoning model, HLM, released last month or so. Basically, they solved ArcAGI and other puzzle-like tasks with so much less data required for training than like a traditional transformer and LLMs. They use transformer LLM, but just training, the way they train is it's kind of like a recurrent neural network. They apply transformer again and again. This kind of novel intervention may be needed for dramatically improving the sample efficiency. I'm not sure if that's required for achieving AGI or at least automating AI research with AI. Honestly, what matters the most to me is to be able to automate AI research. And from then, the pace is going to be extremely rapid. And there may be some task of them. It's not going to be done by AI for like quite a while, but most tasks should be solved. And but for some things like robotics, there's some hardware development takes longer and data collection takes longer because it's a physical world. But so that could take more time. But for virtual tasks, I'm quite optimistic.
I would love to switch our conversation to open source models, considering that you worked on GPT-J. Actually, before we start about in general open source conversation. I'm just wondering, like, what is the story behind, like creating GPT-J? How did you guys manage to build something that that was matching the performance of GPT-3 model back in 2021?
Funny thing is that GPT-J started as a part of a project of open sourcing DALL-E 1. So, DALL-E from OpenAI. They have the very first version of DALL-E is BQBAE, basically based model. So basically you have transformer component and BQBAE encoder decoder. It was trained on large image text dataset. So we were trying to open source that in Elether AI. And Elether AI is an online grassroots Discord server with like a bunch of AI enthusiasts. And actually, one of the people there were already open sourcing LLM text dataset. One of the guys were already open source GPT-2. So we had access to this text dataset and free cloud compute TPUs from Google. So we were trying to do open source DALL-E now. DALL-E has transformer in it. So we decided, why don't we just also build transformer LLM open source as well? Then that became GPT-J.
It was such a great start. Like it gave like so much hope that, like open source models can be comparable to like closed source models. What happened? I haven't seen like too much work, at least like publicly from Eleuther AI. Like why sort of it kind of fade out to some extent?
It became clear that grassroots community could no longer afford increasing training cost. So back then we just used like a few $100,000 worth of TPUs, which was free for us. But if you want to, actually we could scale up to like 30 billion parameters and way more dataset tokens, but we just didn't have credit. What happened is that compute cost is just keep increasing. So only small number of companies like OpenAI, Google, and Alibaba, Quant, those guys can nowadays afford expensive training. Even though GPT OSS 120B costs only like $2 million for training, but that's just one very small fraction of overall like a GPUs. Actually, GPUs teams and everything costs way more. So yeah, we couldn't just do that.
Everything comes down to money.
Interestingly, releasing open source model is by far the easiest way to make impact if you could afford to. So we had to switch to other less impactful activities such as alignment research, dataset open sourcing, and so on. So yeah, that's what happened, I guess.
Do you think because of that, open source models will always be sort of step behind closed source models because of like lack of resources to build a powerful AI?
Yeah, I think it's always behind, but the distance changes depending on the circumstances. So in the current landscape, we have Chinese well-funded AI research groups building very powerful models like R1, Quant 3. So right now we are in a very good time. The best model is R1 and Quant 3. And the thing is, there's pretty much no gap in performance between GPT-5 and or 3 versus Quant 3 or R1 in terms of like MMLU Pro or some like a text-only popular benchmarks, some of them. But the thing is that when you go to long tail tasks, like less popular tasks, the gap starts to widen. For example, the image version of MMLU is called MMMU, and the performance gap is like 82% versus 74%. For healthcare and law and so on, the gap starts to widen. So the thing is, even like a Quant, R1, DeepSeek teams just cannot afford to cover diverse range of tasks beyond the standard set of benchmarks, which is why enterprise adoption of open source LLMs is decreasing to 5% this year, last year. So that's not a good sign. But yeah, that's basically what's happening. But open source models are very important because obviously it's important for research from academia and industry. But also, it's such a nice pressure against like existing companies and providing. They have to provide with more affordable pricing and stuff. R1 was pretty great in that aspect. So basically, Chinese companies, they still have to catch up to American front runners like Google and OpenAI. They are capable of releasing state-of-the-art open source models. So the best way they can make impact and attract attention is to open source, which is why they keep doing it, and which is their motivation. That may change at some point, but hopefully it's going to continue.
Coming back to our conversation about superintelligence, it's just like recently all these AI researchers keep changing their jobs, like moving from OpenAI to Meta, from Meta to DeepMind and vice versa. Like I was just projecting to myself, let's say, like if I'm working in an AI lab and I truly believe that in the next few years that lab will create artificial superintelligence, I would just stay put because I would knew like, okay, my stock options, will be like gold. But like if you're like moving, jumping from one job to another job, do you think it's also to some extent like a signal that even researchers might not truly believe that AGI, like superintelligence will happen in the next few years, that it's still like, okay, next like 20 years. And like, okay, if it's like next 20 years, then, they might change a job and like take more lucrative offers. Like, how would you interpret those moves that AI researchers do in terms of their employment?
I think it's a bit difficult to argue that the fact that Meta could put some key figures in OpenAI or Google means that we're not anywhere close to ASI, because there are rumors that many frontier lab researchers or managers refuse to join Meta despite massive pay. We don't really know the statistics, and maybe there was just a small fraction. But personally, I think AGI is going to happen soon. I think these researchers, maybe some of them agree and others disagree, but they probably are aware that once that's realized, they become pretty much useless to the company. Maybe they get laid off. The thing is, well, for big tech specifically, they don't really treat employees well. Like they just get fired easily. Like, so here's my personal experience. I'm not sure. So I was doing mixture of expert research, which led to what is called spurs upcycling at Google. And some of the co-authors ended up developing what is called group query attention, GQA, which is like a de facto standard for state-of-the-art open source attention. Even some of those co-authors got fired, laid off, because the group they were working for was just disbanded because they thought it was low priority or something. Nobody is really safe, except I think OpenAI and Anthropic are doing better because they are a smaller team. So they don't have a clueless upper management that Google has. Maybe, some of the people escaped from Google to Meta. They had similar problems or something like that. But being able to do like so joining Meta Superintelligence team right now is great in terms of pay, and there's no weird internal projects. They are, because they can like start from scratch, and money is great because once you become useless after ASI, there's a lot of uncertainty. We don't really know whether $100 million is gonna be useful in the post-AGI society, but I think it's at least much better. And there's a lot of like opportunity cost for staying in your company. Maybe you have to start up because once everyone has like once there's ASI can just found startups by themselves. So you can't do startup. That's a huge opportunity cost loss because these guys can just potentially build very lucrative startup, but they just haven't done. So they have many things they have to consider.
Actually, speaking about building startups, I see, like, for example, if we look at Cursor, what would happen with them? So they start like very well, right? And like they reached revenue very fast. But then Those big players, Microsoft, OpenAI, Anthropic, they saw, okay, like this is like a good example. Like there's a like big market for building this coding assistants, and basically what happened, Microsoft cut out distribution, like Cursor's distribution. They cut out them from VS Code. They changed the terms of use, and Cursor now has like very limited access to VS Code. Then Anthropic released Claude Code, which is much better at programming compared to Cursor, at least in my opinion, and from my conversations with programmers. Big chunk of Cursor, big chunk of their revenue also goes to Anthropic, which is kind of ironic. So, like, I'm wondering, like, if you're a founder, you're thinking, okay, like, I want to build company, but you don't want to end up in a situation that you're so dependent on this frontier models. How should like founders think about building product? What would be your advice to people who want to build something but not end up in a like really difficult situation?
Startups like Cursor and Lovable, they have very thin wrapper and work on such a lucrative mainstream field like coding. So they are definitely very susceptible to foundation model player getting verticalized on coding. And there was also Anthropic recently released Claude for finance, which is for finance. So yeah, they're definitely getting verticalized right now. But the growth of Cursor and Lovable specifically was rapid enough that they may be at escaping velocity. So, or maybe not. So they can probably, they have some chance to get acquired by big tech. And API costs will keep decreasing. You can work on a domain with high value work. Your margins will get better. So maybe right now, not great, but eventually probably will be. And in deciding on which startup idea to work on to avoid like getting eaten by Anthropic. So foundation model providers are definitely a threat, but their behavior is rather predictable, I guess, because there are not that many. You just have to avoid moving around the vicinity and focus on vertical ideas that they don't want to touch. Like it's going to be too much hassle for them. So, for example, I know of somebody who worked on MetGemini, which is basically healthcare focused version of Gemini. I haven't had much update on MetGemini, by the way, but so they told me that Google is not very serious about actually using Gemini to healthcare applications by themselves. I think they are just hoping that other people are just going to use Gemini. Also, healthcare is a field where big tech hasn't really done much, even though maybe they could. Even such a big vertical, there's such an opportunity, good opportunity. Actually, OpenAI recently started recruiting a healthcare team for this. But yeah, I don't think they want to handle some messy aspect of healthcare, especially like revenue cycle management, which is massive vertical within healthcare. But those kind of things are where startups should be working on. Unfortunately, but this is kind of separate, but unfortunately, AI agent is such a hot topic that everyone's working on that, even non-AI startups. So it's kind of hard to find the thing that is not worked on by, say, startups founded in the last 10 years. Some of them are pre-ChatGPT and already thinking about AI back then. So those guys are very well positioned to work on any low-hanging fruits type ideas. So yeah, picking up ideas is very difficult, but not because of the foundation model providers, but because of those recent startups competitors.
Do you think that computer science students who aspire to be AI researchers, should they still pursue career in AI research, or they should sort of like think about other avenues because like maybe in 10, maybe in 20 years from now, it will just not make sense?
Based on my timeline, I'd say if you are just studying right now, maybe it's better to work on instead AI engineering, AI engineer or founder than AI researcher, because AI researcher is a career that takes quite a while to. You don't really need PhD per se, but it just takes very long compared with engineering. Or, it takes a while as a founder to like exit, but being a founder demands human connections. Being human is very important, but need researchers to be a human. You can just have AI researcher, AI doing research, and engineering. It's actually you can do quite a bit within a short time frame, and maybe you can switch to founder anytime you want. So I think that's most flexible, and I think that's while being an engineer, you can also lead archive papers and talk about research. That's not a problem.
What are you working on these days?
I'm actually a few friends of mine and I are exploring AI scientist space right now, especially like Alpha Evolve, and there was recent release, actually open source agent that can solve 5 out of 6 IMO questions. So we are playing with some of these stuff, and especially for Alpha Evolve, we reproduce some of the results from Alpha Evolve team at Google, like circle packing, which is basically like a 2D version of sphere packing, and some of the interesting math problems results. And actually, I'm personally exploring commercial applications of this kind of system. For example, in like a quantitative trading or like a crypto trading, many people want to improve their like a training strategy, like training algorithms. Maybe you could improve it with Alpha Evolve like agent or something like that. Anyway, I think crypto specifically, there has been some startups with like a rapidity. So there's like Casa like startup in crypto. It's called Action. They were founded like a year ago, and they already made $150 million fee revenue, which is crazy. But there have been many new concepts happening within crypto. So you have to build like a new startup for new things, and something like that. When you have Cloud Code and like this kind of Alpha Evolve like agent, I think it's going to be quite useful, and maybe you can make yourself stand out compared with other competitors who are not as well versed with AI. So kind of interested, but this is just still ideation phase. So I'm still trying to validate.
Yeah, actually, I recently saw that the author of Situational Awareness, Leopold, he started his hedge fund, and like they make like shitload of money. So it seems like definitely this using AI agents for trading kind of pays off. And actually DeepSeek as well, like they're a hedge fund, right? And they made money, and they used that money to fund their DeepSeek research. So actually, I was very impressed by that story when I learned it. Like, it's so cool. Like you're just like, you figure out how to make money, or how to be like self-sufficient, right? And like, and you funding whatever idea you have, right? Pretty cool.
When you make money from like your AI quant fund, you can probably start open sourcing with the money.
Yeah, and then like maybe open source will catch up with closed source companies finally.